So backcom, every client wants conversion. That's how they're measuring their marketing success. They want conversion. And so what I start off with is like, great, you want conversion. How much traffic are you getting? Oh, we're not really getting a lot of traffic. Well, is anybody aware that you exist? Well, maybe that's the problem. And how's your brand? Like if your brand is terrible and isn't being repeated correctly, so we back them up. So it's like BATC, and then we look at optimization and maintenance. And so not until you get to conversion can you actually then optimize and maintain the thing and turn it from being a slot machine, which is what most marketing is, into a vending machine. That's when you really know that you have true successful performance.
Welcome to the Spark Ideas Podcast. I'm John Yerian, your guide in this journey to sparking something new in your career or your life. This is a show about starting things, about empowering people to connect with others, and about making a difference in the world through collective action. In each episode, I have the privilege of discussing foundational ideas of life and work with some of the most insightful leaders across a range of industries, from technology to hospitality, from journalism to sports. You'll be inspired by how they bring these ideas to life, to help you apply them in your own work and life, and to spark your own journey. Eric Holtzclaw is a visionary, idea guy, and serial entrepreneur with nearly 30 years of experience in founding and growing businesses. His startups include one of the first profitable internet enterprises and a company that appeared on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing list 3 years in a row. Eric's tech background and business experience led him into consulting for Fortune 500 companies as well as startups. Eventually, he took his own advice and formed the full-service marketing firm Liger, where he guides businesses to find their identities and core values, craft their visions, and establish their brands. He is the author of the book Laddering and hosts the podcast The Claw, where he shares advice and insights for entrepreneurs. Eric Holtzclaw, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
It's exciting to be with you, and as always, we're going to pick apart a concept. We're going to take one of the words, one of the ideas covered in my book, but we're going to learn more about your relationship to it. And like always, this is a word that all of our listeners already know, and they do. I don't mean that like they don't, but your sense of it will be different. The way it showed up in your career will be different, and what we want is to give everyone a sense of it, to have a richer relationship to it. And you are a lifelong, inveterate, unrepentant marketer. Is that accurate?
I'm a recovering technologist who owned a research company who now is
But were you
marketing.
Secretly a marketer at that time as well?
You know, it's kind of funny. I had a lady who worked for me back in the day, and she was like, "You're actually a marketer." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Yeah, you're in marketing. You just don't know it." And then I sort of had to eventually realize that it was true. So, because it is all about, selling, but not hard selling, which is kind of marketing's major role.
Well, what we're going to talk about today is performance.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be in a marketing context, but when I think about that, I start to think about words like measurement.
Yeah.
Things that make me a little uncomfortable or nervous. How has performance or performance measurement or any other way you want to take that concept, how's that shown up for you in your career or in your work today?
So running a B2B marketing firm, the word performance happens a lot for us because, companies come to us, and often in B2B, they aren't spending what they should in marketing. So that's the number one problem. And so then you're asking them, hey, start spending money on this thing you've never spent money on before. And then they want to know, well, how do I know it's working? Like what part of that is in place? And as we see marketing leaning much more heavily into technology, there is the ability to track what's performing and what's not. And in order to track what's performing and what's not, you kind of have to know the variability of what you're putting out there. So we're always working this interesting tension with the idea of performance. Like, how do you know that the variables you're testing are not too many? Like, did we change too many things to see what's working and what's not? Like, you got to kind of get it down and boil it down to its like minor essence to really understand if something is different or not. Like, what do I know?
And I think what can make that most challenging in that, B2B scenario you just laid out is that, the first question I have is like, hey, are we tracking performance on everything?
Yeah.
Or is this just like a marketing thing? Because there's a bunch of other stuff going on that impacts what that is, but those things perhaps are not measured the same way, or there's some different logic applied to them. What is your reaction to, or how do you navigate these kind of varied states of performance provability?
So being in B2B, and I kind of hate the term B2B. It's like you got B2B and B2C, right? Is what
They're
people
all
talk
people,
about.
Eric.
Well,
They're all people.
Yeah, and that you know I love you. So that's a little trite too, right? So like B2C versus B2B. B2C is transactional. B2B is relational. So we're doing relational marketing. If you're making a B2B decision, there's a lot of risk. If I make a bad choice, I get fired. I implement a technology that my boss, nobody likes, that kind of thing. And so what happens is people want to take a B2C, which is a transactional idea of performance, and apply it to a B2B or relational problem, which means, oh, we ran that ad and that's what converted people, so we need to run that ad over and over again. It's like, no, that person saw your company for the past 6 to 9 months. They were touched somewhere between 18 to 21 times your messaging. So to give that all the credit for the performance, it's inappropriate, right? Like you've got to think about that across that path. So where was the starting point? When did this customer first enter the journey? By the way, they know the trick, so they didn't show up on your digital property first. Like they went somewhere else and read a review, whatever. So it's a very tricky thing to look at. The closest thing I can relate it to from a personal perspective is the idea of being a wimp who can't pick something up at your house because you haven't been to the gym in forever, and so after 6 months you go to the gym, all of a sudden like that just feels light and you can go up the stairs better and whatever. Similar model. The clients often want, hey, we tweeted something and we didn't sell anything. I'm like, what did you expect? Right? No, you think that's a job. Literally.
No, I believe it. And it I wonder how much we could have a conversation about performance that wasn't just us talking about measurement.
Yeah.
What do you measure? And then what are the framing devices or the context, or how do you organize that measurement to have it connect and make meaning, right? And not just result in disconnected kind of non sequitur numbers. That was challenging for me 15 years ago.
Right.
And at this point in the work that you do and the technology you and your team are touching, kind of seems insurmountable. Or maybe just like impossible. I know that's not your position, but how do you make sense out of the quandary I'm pointing at? So
what's interesting is a lot of the smaller, mid-sized companies that we work with think the big companies have it figured out. And they literally don't. It's far worse, right? Because they've got all this bureaucracy they have to go through, and you can't get all the right things in place and whatever. So we use a combination of anecdotal, so things we know that we did at certain points. So there's an event that was held, there was a press release that went out, there was a great social media post that really did well. So we have to track that along a continuum and understand what those pieces are, and then look at the kind of incremental within that. So what can I see in the evidence of the data that's available to then make a little bit of a beautiful mind leap to know that this was something that indicated giving us an additional, up on our conversion. And we talk about backcom here. So backcom, yeah.
I'm with you. I'm hanging in.
So Liger, you'd think that we would come up with some kind of Napoleon thing, but it's not. So backcom, every client wants conversion. That's how they're measuring their marketing success. They want conversion. And so what I start off with is like, great, you want conversion. How much traffic are you getting? Oh, we're not really getting a lot of traffic. Well, is anybody aware that you exist? Well, maybe that's the problem. And how's your brand? Like if your brand is terrible and isn't being repeated correctly, so we back them up. So it's like BATC, and then we look at optimization and maintenance. And so not until you get to conversion can you actually then optimize and maintain the thing and turn it from being a slot machine, which is what most marketing is, into a vending machine. That's when you really know that you have true successful performance.
You do. I want to look at, there may be more than two sides to the coin. Maybe it's like a die or something. But when I think about areas of performance in my life, personally, where there is like consistent, measurable, better than average result, I can often see behind it a powerful intrinsic interest on my part, an obsessive quality. It could be something I really want or really want to avoid that has me in an active all the time state of high performance. Not every area of my life. What's interesting about that is I wouldn't call any of that strategic, right? Some of that I wasn't even aware of until later on in life I sort of came to it. It lives in the domain of performance. It's very different than the conversation we were just having, which is sort of like working backwards to what you want, whereas you look at certain companies or leaders and you could see, well, this guy just frankly has an obsessive, probably a compulsive behavior disorder, but his product is amazing and it performs. So there's performance there. Do you see that or relate to that?
I do. I guess I would look at it as consistency. So I've always believed that the only way that I could be successful as a leader is by being consistent. So if I'm going to do it, my performance has to be consistent. And you think about the word performance almost has like this heavy lift feel to it, right? Yeah. Like, like you think of the power lifter who's going to go pick up a big, whatever. And really it's about just like the day-to-day consistency of doing the same thing over and over again, such that you start to see that performance work the way that you want it to.
Yep.
But that's not a big change, right? Yep. That's just that if I tell you I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time, I'm literally going to be there at that time. If I'm going to talk to you about a topic, I'm going to talk to you about that topic. And so that sort of, as a leader, reflecting that to the people that work for me, I have that expectation that that's going to impact their performance.
Oh, and you're getting at something so critical, which is it opens up predictability.
Right.
And people almost hear that like it's a pejorative term. It's like, no, that's pretty important when you get in your car. Right. It makes a big difference. The reason your relationship to your laptop or your phone is so intense is because it's the only predictable relationship in your life. It's the only thing that does what you want it to do when you want it to do it.
Right, exactly.
And you experience a ton of variance in other places because your colleagues and your managers aren't consistent.
Yeah.
They occur for you as unpredictable. And so it's a massive performance drain. Because I don't know if Eric's going to be there.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting observation from you for anyone out there who's trying to lead or manage, to ask themselves, hey, has my team kind of seen me do the same thing over and over in a way that they can react to?
Yeah. If you as a leader do not do what you want your team to do, they will never do it. You can't tell them to do it and then you not do it. That doesn't work ever. Like I had a business partner who was very inconsistent, and we had staff meeting every week. My team was the ops team. His team was the sales and marketing team. My team was there 2 minutes before the meeting. His would come meandering in at 3 or 4 minutes because he came in 3 or 4 minutes after. They just followed the ball, right?
Yep.
Like whatever it did. So thinking about that in that category, and what's interesting too is you think about performance, you think like performance reviews, and often it's that heavy lift that people think about again, and it's the consistency. Like, are there consistent problems across that you need to deal with?
That's exactly right, and it's a good point to remind people. We shy away from some of this stuff, being consistent or focusing on performance, because part of us feels it's like laborious or effortful and hard,
boring.
And what I would remind everybody is like it's a lot of work to be in an unpredictable, low-performing environment.
True.
It's secretly a lot of effort.
True.
It's a lot of extra work.
True.
And it's exhausting, but we tell ourselves that true commitment to pattern or habit or process or perform, that seems hard. It's like, come to an office where everybody shows up at different times. Like, that's really hard.
Yes.
It takes a lot of effort. And I think we skip past that. How else do you instill or inspire or create a culture of performance around you? Or how do you, we could take it this way, how do you get clients who at first are misperceiving to sort of buy into the way you think about performance?
Well, for us, that is one of the qualifiers. So when we don't work with clients that see marketing as an emergency. So if they come to us and they're on fire, they've got a thing, they're launching a product in a week, whatever, we're like, yeah, we're just not the firm for you. Like it's not going to work. You're not going to be happy. We're not going to be happy. We're going to part ways in a very negative way, right? So they see it as an investment. They know that it's going to take a period of time. So when you think about attracting the right kind of clients and repelling the wrong ones will come to you with a lot of money, right? Like, hey, we got all this money. We need to do this thing, but it's in a week. And I'm like, yeah, we can't make that. You're going to hate us. We're going to hate you, right? So having someone who understands that there is this like rigor to it, what it looks like on the client side is very important, because we just end up, because like when you first onboard a client, you spend the first 4 weeks it's all the honeymoon dating period. Mm-hmm. And then I talk about the next 2 months of that as the pit of despair, right? Because you've done all the great brand, you've talked about their whatever. And
some money has changed hands, but the world's not different yet.
Right. And they've had a lot of fun because we've taken through a discovery session. Mm-hmm. And then the next 2 months, it's like when you build a house, there's nothing. And they're like, oh my gosh, this house, it's never going to get built. And I'm like, we're doing the foundations, and suddenly it starts to stand up. And so anyone who can't make it through the pit of despair with us, it's typically a sign of an issue because we are doing the things we need to do to then start showing results. It's the planting of the seed and not seeing the seedling for 6 or 7 months.
Have you ever heard a voice in your head telling you to ask for a raise, start a business, or switch careers? Maybe you should. This episode is brought to you by the new book, Spark, 24 Concepts to Ignite, Unstick, or Supercharge Your Work Life. Learn more at sparkbook.com. Go back to just for a second to that other side of the coin and sort of the human emotional other element of it. You definitely occur for me as a guy who has pretty exacting standards for himself.
Yeah.
In and of itself,
right.
Irrespective of an audience or an outcome. It's just the way it is for you. And that ethos kind of infects the way you work. In that, and I mean this in the best way possible, there is a certain inflexibility about it.
Right.
And what I mean by that is there's just no, kind of do it halfway gear.
Right.
It just doesn't exist.
Right.
It's just off the table. Mm-hmm. That's challenging at times.
It is.
But also weirdly reassuring because, I'm not necessarily counting on, some reward to motivate you. I would think, and for folks who've gotten to know you, it would just bother you too much.
Yeah, it would. Well, and the thing about it, what I think I've learned in that category is that I hate, with a capital HAATE, redoing something. Literally hate it. So like if I've built a thing and I give it to you and you're like, oh no, I want to redo it. No. We don't want to redo it. Right? And so that rigor to like get it right and to perform the way that needs to be done at the beginning is because I just don't want to go back to it. Like it's done, it's in the past.
Yeah, and I think it points up what makes performance a little bit tricky for most of us, because areas in my life that are high performing, I don't usually use that terminology.
Yeah.
I'm talking about something I enjoy or I'm obsessed with or is never going to happen to me, whatever. I use different language. I notice that I organize myself differently in those areas. There's preparation and consistency.
So give me an example of one of those for you.
Roller coasters. I'm not into that. You know, that's a simple one.
Right.
So guess what my track record is for getting on roller coasters? It's like outstanding. I don't get peer pressured into it. It never happens. It's a high performing area of my life.
Right.
It's rooted in fear, but what it surfaces is commitment, which is really all we're talking about. It's like, do you care about something enough to just get it right all the time, every time, in a way that can be measured? Let's start trying to define the term. Now, we don't care about Merriam-Webster's definition. We know that there could be several definitions, right? We could have this in an athletic context or others, but let's work on the way we have it, or what would be effective if somebody wanted to get to know you, or what it's like to work with you. And so we've already gone over, and I think the simplest way to put it is performance is just like measuring the occurrence of something, right? It's just the observation of something to determine its impact or outcome.
Right.
To me. I think there's a lot more to it. What else would you have to say to somebody who's trying to earn a deeper relationship to that term on their own?
So what's interesting is just having this conversation, thinking about that, because for me, performance is predictability and it's consistency, which is a huge thing for me. It's huge. Like it's really, I'm a structured, unstructured person. Like I do things, I have to eat at a certain point. Like people know these things about me, right? But I don't have to eat the same thing at the same time. Like it's weird within those constructs. But the predictability of those things happening, that, in my opinion, that's when somebody's performing. It's not like, because I think if I had thought about it before we started talking about this, I would have thought of a grandiose term.
Sure.
Like performance, somebody on a stage, or performance, having to be some grand idea. But it, for me, is just like, just doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it.
And being in the act of it. We talk about performance a lot in an athletic context that has a defined outcome. And so it's a means to an end. You perform and therefore you win and you are the best, and then that's that. And that is joyful, but I think a more important way to think about performance is in the realization that there isn't anywhere to get to. Right. There isn't any there. What the joy is in the performing itself. It's in the mundanity, but also the consistency and the impact of being a high-performing person.
Right.
Is that fair? Do you see that the same way, or would you say it differently?
No, I would. I think that the secret to my success has been in the way that I view that.
Yeah.
Because I suffer a long time with the thing, right? Like I'm okay with the pain and the whatever, but I'm still going to get up and do it and move it along until a point that I'm like, okay, so yeah, we've been doing this long enough and this may not work the way that it should. And I'm always compelled by those, there's those silly like graphics of like, you were right at the edge. You were going to do it. It was going to work, right?
Yeah.
But then often that actually does happen for me. Like I'm right at the point of like, I'm going to give up on this thing.
Yep.
Like I have done it. I've done it as long as I've been told I should do it. I should start to see results. And right at that point is when you're like, oh, okay, there it was.
Well, the key to that breakthrough is occurring for yourself is worth it to continue.
Yeah.
Performance really just comes down to the standards you hold for yourself. For any of us. That's really what it comes down to is what do you consider acceptable or sufficient for yourself in your life? Yeah. And assessing performance in others is always some consideration of their relationship to themselves and how low or high their expectations are for themselves. Yeah. I do think that's something that can be built and honed over time, that can be improved. Right. I know we have people listening who occur for themselves as low performing in areas of their life, or look at you or what you have to say and just think, well, this guy's from outer space. I can't be like this guy. Right. Not realizing some of the kind of grindy stuff you've done in your career and in your life that over time have made you into this. But it wasn't like you just woke up one day and had every little detail of it figured out. Is that relatable? I don't want to project.
Yeah, I mean, so what I think you're talking about, and one of the reasons that clients start working with us is that we hold our clients to a high level of accountability. Yeah. So we have a meeting with them every Monday for 30 minutes with a very tight agenda. We expect them to show up to the meeting. We're going to walk through the agenda. We're going to talk about the deliverables, when they're going to be due, what we're doing, yada, yada, yada. And if they don't prescribe to that accountability, those are some of the clients that don't work well for us, right? And so we're building in this like incremental performance by creating these guardrails of expectation, so every Monday I'm going to talk to you at 11 o'clock and I'm going to tell you things I did and you're going to tell me the things you did and we're going to
but if you hear that with a little bit of wax in your ears, you might have missed it, because what you might have gotten is like, Eric's kind of hard on his clients. No. He sees their time as valuable.
Right, absolutely.
And calls them into a higher performing relationship. That may irk them on occasion, but also has them noticing that he thinks they're worth it.
Right.
They're worth the effort.
Absolutely.
Because you could just bail on it. Just don't do the Monday meeting. There's a lot of easier ways to do it.
Or not run it with a tight agenda and then you're just wasting everybody's time, right? Like I want to get a 30-minute meeting down to 15 minutes. We should be able to walk on that meeting, walk off that meeting, know everything that's to happen. And I have clients who have complained because we make them do Monday. Like Monday's our meeting day. And I've had clients, so you don't bend to your clients and da-da-da. I'm like, okay, so, so we couldn't have this meeting on Tuesday? I'm like, you can have the meeting on Tuesday. If you have the meeting on Tuesday, you won't get any deliverables for 2 weeks because we do our Monday meetings with clients. Tuesday is trafficking. So if you have something that comes up and you need it in, I have to get it into trafficking on Tuesday.
Beware an agency that will meet with you on any given day. You can expect and anticipate a corresponding variance in the deliverable.
Yes.
If they're good with whenever, then I hope you're good with whenever,
right?
And that's at the heart of this performance conversation is we co-create these lowest common denominator. What if none of us, put in the effort? Relationships.
Right.
And you don't get anything out of it.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of performance.
Well, and that's what you should do with your friends, right? So like if you want to do that, like go hang out with them and have bourbons and whatever. Sure. But if you want to get some stuff done, like you got to have some set of rigor. And you're right. We are a good do it for you model. Yeah. We want to put our clients in editor mode. We're an author. And what we're doing is like, hey, here's the thing. Let's move it forward. And we're trying to keep it off of, so they're not going to get asked by their boss. Hey, you told me you were going to have this thing a week ago. Where is it?
Yeah.
Right?
And it really is catching, for folks who are working in low performing environments or struggling with this. Just know how powerful that impact is, even in just calling yourself to a higher level of performance that you don't even say to anybody else.
Yeah.
They will notice after a week or two that you're the punctual person. Right. And it gets a lot harder to be late for you. Mm-hmm. Right? It all starts to work, but doesn't have to come from a place of like lecturing or teaching. The more you are consistent and high performing, it will require the people around you to be the same way.
Yeah, and even here at Liger, we follow EOS, which talk about adding rigor, right? Like we have L10 meetings, there's issues, we're covering through those issues. So we add this even extreme level of rigor on top of that. Yeah. And we often have to then think about how to celebrate the things that we've done well, because all we ever do is think about all the things we need to do to fix things. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe not your most natural tendency to celebrate stuff all the time. No. That might be in a different category. Well, such a pleasure to unpack
absolutely.
this with you. Thank you so much for the time and for all the insight and performance. Eric Holtzclaw, thanks.
Anytime.
Brought to you by the new book, Spark, 24 Concepts to Supercharge Your Work Life. Learn more at sparkbook.com.